Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome. I see some new eyes. I don't see any new faces. Occasional pair of new glasses. One day we'll be out of this and we'll laugh so hard. Welcome to the Congregation for Humanistic Judaism of Metro Detroit. My name's Jeffrey Falick. I'm the rabbi here. It's a pleasure to have you all. I know you've come mostly to see Dr. Hillenberg tonight, and we're really excited that he's going to make this presentation because we desperately need it. And he's told us that there is a discount on his hourly rate, but we will all qualify for at least a good hour of therapy tonight. So, but in all seriousness, this is an important topic, and I know a lot of us are getting exhausted. So it's I'm very, very appreciative. Next week, I'm going to exhaust you some more when I will be speaking about Christian nationalism ascendant. We'll look at what their plans are for us. They're not good from our perspective, and we'll look at the ways that they're affecting us today already. Hi. The following week, we'll be off for Labor Day, and when we return, we'll have 2 weeks of services. The first week, I'll be talking about who are today's Orthodox Jews, trying to demystify that community a little bit for us, or those communities. And then the following week, I'll be giving, by request, an update on what's been going on in Israel. Then we'll be taking some time off from Friday nights because we will be into the high holidays. And during the high holidays, we don't generally have Friday nights. So it's a delight to see all of you. Our readers tonight are Audrey Pleasant, Suzanne Paul, Lonnie Fleischer, Charlie Paul, and David Finkel. And we'll begin, Arthur, with the first slide. Where the world is dark with illness, let us kindle the light of healing. Where the world is bleak with suffering, let us kindle the light of caring. Where the world is dimmed by lies, let us kindle the light of truth. May the honor of lighting this flame inspire us to acts of goodness that illumine all the world. May the mitzvah of kindling these Shabbat candles remind us to sanctify life with the power of light. And I would like to invite Bruce and Cindy to come up and light our Shabbat candles.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Our ancestors hallowed the Sabbath day. In dark times, it was a refuge for them. And in times of prosperity, it gave them rest and joy. As a community, we celebrate the opportunity to gather in that spirit, even as we imagine Shabbat anew. May we, too, find rest from the day's work and refuge from our cares. May we, too, feel the warmth of love and companionship. May we, too, feel our joys heightened and our sorrows softened by the love we give and receive.
May we be
blessed with Shabbat joy. May we be blessed with Shabbat peace. May we be blessed with Shabbat light.
Shalom Aleichem, Mohavei Shalom, Shomrei Shalom. לשלום, אוהבי השלום, צאתכם לשלום. מיום זה לימים הבאים, שלום עליכם. שלום עליכם, אוהבי השלום, שומרי שלום. שלום עליכם, רודפי השלום, שלום עליכם. בואכם לשלום, אוהבי השלום, צאתכם לשלום. מיום זה לימים הבאים, שלום עליכם.
Tonight, as we welcome Shabbat, we look to this moment in time to once again gain perspective on where we have been and where we are going. On this Shabbat, may we find the space to consider and to challenge. May we find the courage to do what is right. Together, let us find meaning, calm our anxieties, understand our purpose, and appreciate our accomplishments. Let us find the strength to continue working for ourselves and others. Let us share the burdens and blessings of responsibility. Let us locate the will to change the things we can no longer accept. Let us do all this and more, mindful that we are a community of humanistic Jewish believers, unbroken and unbowed, prepared to face all that life has in store for us. Let us strive to feel these bonds of belief and community when we are together and when we are apart. Let us rejoice in our ties. Let us rejoice in our collective power. Let us rejoice in the gift of Shabbat.
There's a place with answers we are seeking. There's a place to find out light of hope. Where's the strength to realize our vision? יש מקום בתוכנו. יש מקום בתוכנו. Look within yourself, you'll find it there. There's a place with wisdom that can guide us. There's a place where we know what's right or wrong. Where's the path to peace that we all long for? יש מקום בתוכנו, יש מקום בתוכנו. Look within yourself, you'll find it there.
Shabbat Shalom all. I got to take this off. At one with our forebears, we affirm that righteousness and enlightenment shall be our torch. We shall teach these values diligently to our children all the days of our lives. We shall endeavor to live by these values in the comfort of our homes or on cold and windswept roads. Whether adversity bows our head or fulfillment makes our spirits soar, Our hands shall mete out justice to all, and our eyes shall be open to the light of truth. We shall emblazon our paths through life with this light as a beacon for all humankind. Ida Goldfinger? Who was it? Okay.
תקוותי בי, איפה כוחי, כוחי בי, וגם בך, איפה כוחי, כוחי בי, וגם בך, וגם בך. Where is my light? My light is in me. Where is my hope? My hope is in me. Where is my strength? My strength is in me. And in you. And in you. Where is my strength? My strength is in me. And in you, and in you.
May all who walk the paths of righteousness, who work for the good of humanity, and bear the burdens of others, and who give bread to the hungry, who clothe the naked, and take the friendliness into their homes, see the work of their hands endure, and may the seed they sow bring abundant harvest. על שלושה דברים העולם קיים. 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 השלום, השלום, השלום.
The blue dot. On February 14th, 1990, as the first deep space probe Voyager 1 left our planetary neighborhood for the fringes of the solar system, engineers turned it around for one last look at its home planet now 4 billion miles away. Carl Sagan wrote, "Look at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives." The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors so that, in glory and triumph, they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known.
Na'aseh shalom, shalom ba'olam. Na'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam ve'imru shalom. Na'aseh shalom Aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam ve'imru shalom. Na'aseh shalom, shalom ba'olam. Na'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam ve'imru shalom. In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and our support. Those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Tonight, our well wishes are extended to these members of our community and to their loved ones, to Joe Gaydon, Ruthie Goldman, Max Lark, Deborah Luria, Rabbi Peter Schweitzer, and Beverly Siegel. And if there's someone whom you're thinking about, we'll go around the room. We'll start over here on the left. Anybody? Over here in the section? Anybody over here or on the sides? Good. I'm glad that all your loved ones are in good health. May all who suffer know that they are not alone. We are with them. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a refuah shlema, a complete recovery, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits. Mekom hakoach betocheinu, mekorot habracha michevroteinu. May the source of strength that dwells so deep within us Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Shalom. Mekom hakoach betocheinu, mekorot habracha michevroteinu. May those in need of healing know refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Shalom. I lost your voice. I lost your timbre, your cadence, your accent. I lost your voice. I had it in the first month. I had it the first year. Then it faded. Then it was gone. I lost your voice. I can't hear it anymore. I lost your voice, but not your words. Your words of approval, your words of wisdom, your words of support, of love, of guidance. I lost your voice, but I'll always have your words. Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us. Our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, our congregation continues to mourn the death of our congregant Enid Grauer, as we tonight also observe the yahrzeits of Ziga Allweiss, Rosa Fastovsky, Miriam Finkel, Lawrence Levine, Max Litke, Grigory Lumelsky, Jacob Pincus, Shirley Silber, Anita Stekloff, and Lloyd Wohlberg. As we did earlier, for those who are ill, if there's someone whom you're remembering, we'll start over here. Please feel free to share. Lonnie. Thank you. Elaine. Anybody else on this side? Over here, anybody? Did we miss anyone at all? We say, Yehi zichram livracha, may memories of them provide a blessing, by which we mean that as we go through our lives, with them no longer in our lives, we hope that pleasant memories of them will give us at least a moment of comfort. If you can do so comfortably, please rise as together we recite our humanistic interpretation of Kaddish. Nit gadal v'nit kadash beruach ha'adam. Let us dignify and ennoble all people in the spirit of our shared humanity. Let us acclaim the preciousness of life. Let us show gratitude for life by approaching it with reverence. Let us embrace the whole world, even as we wrestle with its parts. Let us each, in our own way, take up our share in serving the world and seeking truth. May our commitment to life help us to strengthen healing of spirit and peace of mind. May justice and peace permeate and comfort the house of Israel and all those who dwell on earth. And let us say, Ken Yehi, may it be so. Please be seated. I am so pleased, delighted, happy, all those words, to have the opportunity to introduce to you tonight our guest speaker, Dr. J. Bruce Hillenberg. I don't know what the J is for. You'll tell me at some point, or maybe you'll tell all of us. Yeah, oh, such a profoundly wonderful name. Mazel tov. I had the opportunity to first get to know Bruce and his wonderful wife, Cindy, on a little screen through Zoom as they made an inquiry about the congregation, and I got all excited because I thought these people, should they join, are going to be something for us, and boy, are they. They have really become devoted members of our congregation and leaders in our congregation. And honestly, a great deal of our programming these days also consists of Bruce, and we're really happy about it too, as they are so committed to our philosophy and our community. Tonight, as you know, Bruce is going to discuss the emotional impact of our American crises and how we can better hope to cope with them. Bruce is a board-certified clinical health psychologist. In June 2019, he retired from his position as Director of Psychology and Chief of Pain Management for Beaumont Health. Since then, he's continued to maintain a private clinical practice specializing in chronic pain, coping with chronic health conditions, and promoting resilience among healthcare professionals. Bruce earned his PhD in clinical health psychology from West Virginia University in 1984, after earning his MA in counseling psychology from the University of West Florida and his BA at MSU. After he took his PhD, he began his career with an internship in clinical health psychology at Mid-Missouri Health Sciences Psychology Consortium in Columbia, Missouri. He has 37 years of experience providing clinical services, teaching, conducting research, and leading practice innovation in the areas of pain and chronic disease management. Among his many professional associations, he most recently served as chair of the Pain Psychology Task Force for the Michigan Psychological Association until 2021, and as president of the Midwest Pain Society until 2020. And that's just a little bit of his CV. And I'm so honored to have the opportunity to welcome to the BIMA Dr. Jeffrey Bruce Hillenberg. I promise that's the only time I'll tell you this.
Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. This was a talk that I have been looking forward to giving. Actually, this is the first talk I've given in 3 years since I retired professionally. But like many of you, as I watch the news on a daily but less daily basis recently, I notice how we jump from one traumatic and painful story to the next. And one of the great things about our country is we rarely stop to connect with our feelings and look at the psychological impact the evolving events in our world and our country have. So I thought it would be really helpful just to press the pause button, talk a little bit about just the psychological, emotional impact that I, and I'm sure you have experienced from many things going on, especially if you're oriented towards a more humanistic worldview and a humanistic way of looking at life. So I thought we could talk about that, get a little participation from the audience, and I'll try to be brief. But I thought this quote really, in a sense, for me, highlights what I and maybe some of you are up against. And I know Rabbi Falik will talk about that more next week. We heard it last week in a presentation about how one of our members really kind of lost his standing and his role in the community directing a news program in Howell, Michigan, and how some of our values opponents, in a way, kind of moved him out of town. So there's kind of a sequence of things. But for me, this quote, and this is from Donald, the only quote I'm going to give you from Donald Trump, but I think it really highlights it. It's from Playboy in March of 1990. And the quote is, "I think if this country gets any kinder or gentler, it's literally going to cease to exist." Okay? So I thought I would set the stage with that. I probably could, we could just kind of go on to a few minutes of meditation and we would understand why we were all here. Here's another quote, and this comes from our favorite friend, Mike Huckabee. And this is from August 1st post. And the sensitivity and the inclusiveness in this quote is amazing to me. The Cleveland Indians finally knuckled under to left-wing activist groups and changed the team's name to the Cleveland Guardians. So how's that working out for them? Well, local TV ratings for their games have plummeted by 30%. Live game attendance in the MLB is down 6.5% from pre-pandemic, 2019, while attendance at Cleveland games is down, you guessed it, 30%. Who could have predicted it would be a stupid business decision to anger and insult your core customer base just to please a handful of loud activists who probably don't even patronize your business anyway? They should have taken a lesson from Disney, who happen to want to support LGBTQ plus rights, which went woke and lost 35% of its stock value, making it officially the worst performing stock in the Dow Jones average so far this year. So we have greed versus values. Okay. So I had to start with this. And this is from probably one of my favorite songs from John Lennon. Imagine. Imagine there's no heaven. We're contrasting with the two first quotes. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us, only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. Isn't it hard to do? It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You? You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world would be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger, a brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You? You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one. So we have a real competition of conceptual ideas and values about who we are and why we're here and what we're supposed to do in our time here. I won't read this whole song, but this is from Jackson Browne. And I'm going to read the first stanza because I really think it stands very true. And we know that there has always been these competing forces throughout history and throughout the history of our nation. Our nation is built upon these competing forces. And his first stanza of Walls and Doors is from Jackson Browne. Ever since the world's existed, there's one thing that is certain. There are those who build walls and those who open doors. But this, my love, I'm thinking you already knew. Okay, so we're all teed up. We can go to the first slide. And obviously, I don't have all the pictures that we could put up. But one of the things I do want to talk about is that as we are confronted by a pandemic of bad news, which is amplified and on steroids because of media, social media, 24-hour news cycle, and the alignment more significantly in our political arena. It is just ever present in our face. And one of the things I do want to talk a lot on the psychological aspects, and I'll come back to that, is despite these kinds of events and the philosophies and the beliefs that exist behind them, We can remain psychologically efficient. We can remain psychologically effective. And we can live our life driven by humanistic values. And we'll kind of talk a little bit about that. Because for me, a key thing is a concept called emotional judo, which is how within yourself to not be influenced by the emotions of others unless they are good for your health. And to be able to set those emotional boundaries, whether they be in an interpersonal social arena or whether they be coming through the TV or other means of information coming to us. Okay. So really, in a way, and something, in fact, I talk a lot about with clients that are struggling with chronic health problems, and I feel this a lot sometimes, that the strategies we'll talk about are how do you stay on the good side of a shitty situation? Okay. So, and one of the things we do know, if we look at these characteristics, is that they are supported, whether it's more politics, whether it's denial of science, whether it's racism, whether it's the availability of guns, all of these things. We know that these issues, whether it's denial or support for things that are, for me, threatening as a humanist, there are an increasing social force behind this, and I know that the Rabbi will talk more about this next week, that believe in their value system that to support undemocratic guidelines that are intensified by allegiance to totalitarian, cult-like mindsets and adherence, and because of their own inability to resolve their own psychological issues, for those who kind of support a totalitarian approach or an undemocratic approach, because of their inability to deal with their own psychological issues, they're more prone to conspiratorial, suspiciousness, and distrust, and with difficulty in channeling anger and rage. Okay. So not only do we as humanists need to attend to our psychology, but those who are our existential opponents or challenges need to address that as well. So we can go to the next slide. Okay. I'm not sure about you, but I know a few months ago, my wife and I, Cindy, really had to start turning that TV off. I wanted to know what was going on. I wanted to be aware of things, but I became aware of the fact that it was just overwhelming. And I had to stop doom scrolling, kind of looking for all the, and I really had to begin to pull back because I felt pulled into the vortex of vicarious trauma. I have lived a lucky life. I personally have never experienced anti-Semitism. Because of my white privilege, I've never experienced the pain of a person of color. I'm a straight white man. I've never experienced, what it's like for somebody in the LGBTQ plus community. I'm a man. I've never experienced what it's like for a woman to experience what they've experienced. And maybe in earlier life I was able to be disconnected from that, but it seems at this point now for me, and I realize this is kind of my own debriefing here, but as I've gotten into my 70s and become more aware of things and more aware of my own privilege, I'm just overwhelmed by the pain that is now intensified, as I said before, through politics and the media, but pain that we know has been around for centuries and centuries and centuries and thousands of years. So I just was going to ask, I would just like 3 volunteers, and it's just one word, but if I could get 3 people to shout out one word that would best represent their emotional experience of going through the last several years with all of this news events and events in our world and our country. If you could just share, I just need 3 people to just shout out a word that represents your feelings. Optimism? Okay. Okay, well, anger? Fear? Anxiety. Okay. So, thank you. So let me ask this, by a show of hands, how many people would say that they feel emotionally impacted by either witnessing or being a direct target of some of the things we have up there that we've been talking about? How many people would say they had some feeling of emotional? Okay. So what I'm asking is, how many of you, by a show of hands, have been affected emotionally by these types of events? Okay. Okay. We can go to the next slide. So future shock. And because of the intensification of things through the media, 24-hour news cycle, and a more explicit position in our political discourse and our political process. In a way, Alvin Toffler and his wife Adele Farrell, back in the 70s, began talking about the change of technology and how it was a shock. But in a way, I think it's very consistent with what we've done because of how many things have happened in the last 3, 4, 5 years. And so it's the anxiety brought on by too much change. Look at the change in politics in the last 8 years, or the last 12 years. It's amazing. If you look at some of the politicians that are currently running, and you look at their agendas, the change is amazing. And what we find is that some people want to move towards a more inclusive, democratic, collective, supportive future. And some people want to go back to an exclusive, privileged, controlling way of being. So the inhabitants of the earth are divided not only by race, nation, religion, or time, but also their position in time and where their values exist. Do they exist in the past or do they exist in the future? Okay. Very quickly, 3 quick, if I could get a couple more people. Can you tell me one value of yours that you feel is under threat by the move towards more undemocratic, totalitarian, conspiratorial concepts and political movement? One value that you feel is at risk. I'll say inclusion, truth, honesty, compassion, integrity, autonomy, freedom of speech, freedom as a woman. Okay. So there's a lot of values that are being challenged. Okay. Next slide. So let's think about the 10 core commitments or values for humanists. And in a way, you can see as you look through this circle that all of these values are being challenged. And I know that the rabbi will talk about this next week. If you think about the Christian national movement, which again is very separate from loving progressive liberal Christians. But if you look at the Christian national movement and the movement towards taking our country back to probably what it was like in Virginia at the beginning of our country and a little bit in Barbados, it would be against these values. And one of the key things is that each of these values is connected to a whole emotional state in our life, right? That these values are not only important for us to drive who we are and how we want to be with other people, but they make up our emotional world. Being ethical is very calming, right? It's very reassuring. It's comforting. It helps with sleep. Humility reduces anxiety, creates openness. It also facilitates connection. It stimulates your oxytocin and your endorphins, neurochemicals. So the key thing about our values is they are all connected to our emotional life. And if our values are impacted, they will back into our emotional life. Okay. Okay, if we can go to the next slide. Okay. So I think what we're setting the stage here is so that for those who are of a humanistic bent, and again, I think most good people who support an inclusive, collaborative, social order that is respectful are humanists, whether they know it or not. Okay? Because most people who even though they're not affiliated with that, it's very important to them. And as our values are being challenged, we are more at risk for vicarious traumatic stress. Trauma, and I've done a lot of work with trauma survivors and PTSD over the years, but one of the key variables of trauma or conditions that mimic post-traumatic stress disorder is the risk to not only your life and safety, but also the safety of your existential world, your emotional world. I'll talk in a little bit about a concept called our moral safety net. Our moral safety net is that net of values and lived behavior that supports our emotional comfort and our security. That in a way we have not only attachment interpersonally to other people, we have an attachment to our values and the safety of our values. And when those values are under threat, our existential existence or our existential priorities are at threat, and therefore we're at risk for post-traumatic stress-like symptoms. Okay. So let's go to the threats. Next slide. And this is just a review of what I was mentioning. Increased prevalence of illiberal values where there's not a belief in freedom of thought and freedom of behavior, and a collaborative, democratic style of decision-making and fairness, misinformation, again, social manipulation, cult-like responses to lies and denials. With any cult, you can have a highly symptomatic leader with followers who develop what they thought about back in the 1800s and the beginning of psychiatry. They call it, and I'm not really good at French, folie à Milan, which is madness of the millions. And it's how a symptomatic individual can begin to spread symptoms among a population of individuals. And then if they live in a silo, that can be amplified and amplified and amplified and amplified to the point where they can develop a way of being, a way of believing that's kind of now completely new and almost disassociated from what they may have believed before. Loss of honesty and humility is higher values, which we talked about. I already mentioned white supremacy, racism, xenophobia, misogyny, transphobia, anti-Semitism, hate speech, abusive language, the challenge to a person's choice and freedom. This next one you can see when you drive on the expressway. Pathological individualism. It's now found its way into the highways of America. It's all about me, right? All about me. And threats to the public health. Obviously, so you take all of this stuff, isolate us with COVID, it's quite a mix, quite a brew. Next slide. So, liberalism, core value is trust of others, tinged with a bit of prudence or self-responsibility, conscientiousness. Conservatism is distrust of the people tempered by fear. This came from William E. Gladstone, who was a prime minister in England in the late 1800s. But we see that. We see this challenge between trusting other people's decision-making and the desire to control their decision-making through fear. Okay. So let's go to the next slide. So what are what's the psychological impact? These are all the things I've been going through. So I thought I would just kind of write them up, and I thought maybe some of you might be going through, but lo and behold, when I look at the literature and when I look at surveys and social psychological studies of impact to the pandemic, to politics, they're right there. And I love one of the articles by Kevin Smith published in 2022, and the title of the article was "Politics is Making Us Sick." And he documented with good evidence-based conclusions that the impact on our mental and physical health is significant, even if we are not aware of it. So some of the possibilities would be existential and general, again, existential anxiety, anxiety about our existence, our values, our way of life, the way of life of others, challenge to our existence, not only physical, psychologically, interpersonally, and just general anxiety about our country's future. And we do know that this anxiety can, if you have any pre-existing other kinds of anxieties, like I do, it can really stir that up, okay? So anybody who has a kind of a predisposition to any kind of mental health or behavioral health issue, you can have this kind of post-traumatic stress, which can kind of already amplify pre-existing issues. I don't know if any of you have felt demoralized, but I'm very demoralized and struggling to not be hopeless, okay, due to humanistic values and behavior being challenged. Sadness of how many times have I cried when listening to the news of those pictures at the beginning, when I would just sit there and just feel, like powerless. What can I do? Challenges to trust. I don't know if you have friends who are in the blue side and in the red side, but if you live just with blue people, it's different than if you have blue and red. And I realize that's so simplistic to kind of think in a black and white perspective, but I'm just doing it to make the point that those relationships are being challenged. I do so much therapy with people where one of the big issues is how politics and religion have gotten in the way of family relationships and caused cutoffs. Feeling vulnerable. I was thinking of toning the talk down because I was worried this would show up on the internet and somebody would come after me or my wife. And that's not because I'm an anxious guy, which I am. It's because the fear of reoccurrence. It kind of like flashbacks that it could happen to me, and it's scary. That is sometimes not even safe to voice your concern. Obviously, isolation, mind-body distress. Okay. So like I say, traumatic news can really trigger PTSD symptoms. Like when we think of PTSD, we basically think of like 4 dimensions. The first dimension is you keep re-experiencing what happened. The thoughts, memories, nightmares, dreams, it comes back a lot. And I don't know if you've experienced that, but after events, they replay in my mind a lot. Then there could be, secondarily, a desire to avoid thinking about it because it's too uncomfortable to re-experience it. Turning off the news, moving away from it. It could also change how a person views the world. More pessimism, more negative beliefs, more fear, less trust. And lastly, there can be increased arousal, difficulty sleeping, feeling irritable, feeling on guard. Okay, next. So what do we do? Okay, we want to, so building a firewall. Now, I've always, one of my areas of interest always in my field, in clinical psychology, has been, why do resilient people do what they do, and what do they do? Probably the first book I read when I was in undergraduate school at Michigan State in the 60s was Viktor Frankl's book, A Man's Search for Meaning. And it was one of the first books about how do people in such a horrible situation find psychological flexibility, which we'll talk about. How do they maintain some capacity to stay in the boat and not fall out of it? Okay, next slide. Well, we know, like chicken soup, or like stock is to chicken soup, that courage is the critical ingredient for remaining resilient. Because one of the things we know about resilience is it takes practice and it takes effort. I always tell my patients that, and this is true neurophysiologically, that fear is 10 times stronger than wisdom. Adrenaline is a more powerful neurochemical than endorphins. Because if a tiger's chasing you, you don't want to stop to be mindful and appreciate the awness. You want to get the hell out of there, right? So historically, adrenaline is more powerful. And we know that the fear centers in the brain are much more robust in their capacity if we don't develop the intellect and the wise mind skills required to navigate through difficult circumstances. Okay, next slide. Are we doing okay with time? I never have a watch anymore, so, okay. Psychological flexibility was actually it was coined by Stephen Hayes, who's a psychologist at the University of Nevada. And what he wanted to do is come up with a model that is what he called trans-theoretical, meaning it's not based on a theory. It's really based on looking at research and trying to find the active ingredients, the recipe for psychological resilience. And like in my field of psychology, there's like 200 different models of counseling or theories of change. But the model of psychological flexibility is like, what are like the core ingredients that cuts across everything? And what's interesting is when you look at the research, and as we talk about this, use this as a self-assessment. But what I find, even in my work, is those who live with very difficult circumstances, which has been my specialty in practice, those who develop psychological flexibility learn how to be on the good side of very difficult situations and have a humanistic life each day despite tremendous suffering. And psychological flexibility does not remove suffering. It allows us to live on the better side of suffering, right? But it takes practice, 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 practice. So I want to just kind of go over these core ingredients. So one ingredient, which we all know, is being present in our daily life on purpose, because we have a reason to do it, without judgment. And this is a quote from John Kabat-Zinn, who many of you may have read about, kind of like who coined mindfulness, you know, kind of like the modern view towards like meditation and Buddhist thinking. But the key point of judgment is accepting the reality we have, not the reality we want. Learning to embrace the reality we have in front of us rather than being distracted in our mind and our emotions on the reality that used to be, or that we really want now, or that we're afraid of we'll have in the future. Learning to be with the reality we have now is what makes people flexible, okay? And the reason why is that when we're present on purpose, and that purposefulness comes because we develop our intellect, we develop our wise mind through practice, we become much more psychologically efficient. We don't waste energy on things that have no return on investment. I always say that worry is like throwing your money out the window. Nothing's coming back, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is learning to dial up our intellect or our wise mind, the part of us that's observant, humanistic, understands and is learned, and understands critically and concretely what's helpful and what's not, to dial that up and dial down the emotional mind so we can be more efficient in the use of our mental energy. I always laugh, but it's true. My goal in life is to have the best day possible with the least number of thoughts. Right? I'm seeking efficiency. In my practice, I asked patients, and I did a study like a couple of years ago, what percentage of, after we define the difference between helpful and unhelpful thoughts, I would ask them, on average during the day, what percentage of your thoughts are unhelpful? What do you think the average was? 70%. Okay. So, and the more that we remove distractions of the emotional mind, the more we can live fully our humanistic values in terms of how we treat ourselves and how we care for the world. That we need to accept radically what we have right now, even if it's scary, and that we move towards what is difficult. Most of psychotherapy is about helping people not avoid what is difficult, but move towards what is difficult. Okay, that's most of what psychotherapy is about, is learning to move towards what's difficult rather than away from what's difficult. A fear of spider would be the simplest example, right? Or somebody who has erroneous beliefs about their responsibility for events in the past that have nothing to do with them. Okay? But learning to move towards what's difficult makes us more psychologically flexible because we learn from experience. And we unlearn some of our avoidance and some of our anxiety. Investing in self-compassion, being kind to ourselves, which is very hard growing up in our country, which is very focused on criticism, judgment, measuring ourselves against the rule, measuring ourselves against other people. Learning to be kind to ourselves doesn't come easy, but it's critical because we know that when we're kind to ourselves and we try hard, we're more efficient and we're more effective. It's a myth that self-criticism makes people more effective. It doesn't. Because in the long run, it wastes so much energy that over time, it reduces efficiency and effectiveness through psychological friction. Clarifying and upholding our values, knowing what we believe in. And the last, engaging in value-based action with an eye towards consistency and sustainability. This is very critical, okay? So we need to stop doom scrolling. We need to have a more optimistic bias. We need to train our brain to tend to positive experiences. We need to have positive impact in small ways. We need to process our feelings. We need to engage in random acts of kindness. And we need to learn to be more mindful and less emotionally reactive to bad news. Okay, next. So what are some of the consequences of psychological flexibility? And again, as I went through that, I'm hoping everybody kind of just took a little assessment in terms of kind of the guidelines that you live by. We know that people who follow those principles, no matter how difficult their circumstances, can have a positive mood and be more mindful, more present. More effective, that is, self-efficacy means that you predict that when you face a future problem, you have confidence you'll figure out how to traverse through it. That you have emotional and behavioral willingness, the willingness to open up your emotions and the willingness to move towards what's difficult rather than away from it. I've overcome my fear of being an MRIs using that strategy. Being proactive, the capacity to bounce back, having fewer regrets by not being distracted from one's values, and finding joy despite the presence of threats. So for me, the whole idea of psychological flexibility is that this is just kind of like a checklist for me and for you, if you want to use it, to just kind of look at, well, how do you cope? And how do you traverse through difficult circumstances? And if you follow these principles, you still will suffer because of what we're challenged by and what's potentially coming down the road. We will all suffer. But we will be able to smile, we'll have fewer regrets, and we'll be warriors for our cause. Okay, so now I have one last, some of you know it, not all of you know it, but I've been writing poetry since the 60s, so here's a little poem to end it, and then I'll open it up to any questions. A gentle dance with life. Seize life by the gentle outline offered by uncertainty and adventure. Grasp nothing. Just surf the wave with your most beautiful smile. Be open to what is. What should be is a ghost never known. Pay attention and traverse the obstacles with the spirit of your favorite song. Share your wisdom by gentle displays of interest, passion, and robust love. Dance along on the crazy path life mixes for us at the bar of life. Find the courage to be present and fully engaged, yearn less and enjoy more. Life is watching and enjoying the popcorn. Okay. So I don't know how much time we have, but I'm open to questions. Okay.
Bruce, I assume that Liz Cheney is, and our congregation has a very healthy psychology. Happy with what she did. We're happy with our choice of humanism and our choice of our philosophy. It took a lot of courage for us. A lot of us separated from our family situation in order to be humanists. Liz Cheney did the same thing, a lot of courage, and she must be very healthy psychology, would you say?
You know, from what I've experienced, yes, because think about it this way. Look at her willingness to move towards what's difficult in a values-driven way, standing up for what she believed in. For me, that's the best example of, and she was very present. She was very present in all her descriptions and all her, because she stayed focused. She wasn't distracted by her own emotions and her own emotional mind. She stayed very focused on what she believed in and what she wanted to communicate and what she stood for, and she did what was difficult. That's part of being psychologically flexible. Psychological flexible doesn't mean that you can't have very different values from us and priorities, but that you carry yourself with humility, right, and respect, which she did.
She probably feels psychologically healthy. I mean, she probably sleeps well.
Which is what I said before, that when you have humility and you move towards what you believe in with your values, it has a positive emotional effect and a positive physiological effect, right? Right? People who have unresolved stuff, disconnected from their values, a lot of anger and rage, a lot of suspicion, don't sleep well at night.
Versus Trump and all of that anger and rage. I mean, you could see the polls, difference in polls.
Right, right.
And
He's going to send you a bill in a minute for the hour.
he's psychologically deranged.
Who else has?
Anybody, any other questions? Okay, no, I think you asked me, is there somebody or? Oh, a swing thought. Okay, so for me, my coping thoughts are stay present, do something important, be helpful, be kind to somebody else. And I'll say those things to myself. So when I feel like I'm being challenged and I'm being kind of moving off base, I'll say something like that. I always say that coping is like driving safely. You need to have that much attention and that much awareness of what you're doing so that if you drift out of your lane, you know how to get back in your lane and know where you're going. And if you keep doing that, safely driving through life and have a good value system, you can deal with a lot of crazy drivers.
Thank you. Wow. Sorry, I put on the super mask while I was up there. Thank you so much, Bruce, for the insights and the help. I know I walk away feeling a little bit more empowered, and I hope that the rest of you will too. If you were looking, I know some of you were taking pictures of or trying to capture those 10 commitments. They're on the wall of our temple right over there. They've been there for several years. Those are the 10 commitments that were, it's a nice little piece that was published by the American Humanist Association. You can find it online too. But as I say, they're framed on our wall along with a lot of our other values. And anyway, a million thanks. That was incredibly, I think, therapeutic, to put it mildly. And your presence in this congregation and your articulation of our humanistic values, well, I'm just glad you already had a career, because I wouldn't want you to take mine. It was stunningly helpful. All right, we're going to conclude now with this beautiful song, and then we will gather outside tonight, because I think the weather is good, for a little Oneg Shabbat. May we know peace as we go on our way. May we be guided by love. May we be blessed with health and joy. May this be our blessing. Shalom. 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 May this be our blessing. Shalom. 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 May this be our blessing. Shalom. May we be sheltered by the wings of peace. May we abide in safety and in love. May grace and compassion find their way to everyone. May this be our blessing. Shalom. 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 May this be our blessing. Shalom. 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 May this be our blessing. Shalom. Thank you to our music director, Joseph Palazzolo, to David Weeks, who does the streaming, to Arthur for the slides, to all of you, Shabbat Shalom.